As we approach the quarter mark of the NHL season, LA Kings TV analyst Jim Fox joins us to discuss what we've seen so far and what we could see going forward on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the last 30 years, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, match with Indeed. We are always excited when our guest today joins us. You know him as the longtime color analyst for Kings TV broadcasts and also doing the Kings simulcast these days. He is former Kings winger and a great legend, a great broadcaster, and he is, of course, Jim Fox. Hey, Jim, how are you?
Eddie, I'm doing great. Thanks very much for having me again. Appreciate
it. Thank you very much. We always appreciate your time. And I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about your partner on the Kings broadcast. We had Nick Nixon on right before the Kings home opener and had a chance to talk to him for the first time since he announced that this would be his final year of an amazing career. And while it's going to be sad to see him go, how lucky have we been as Kings fans and for you to work with two Hall of Famers in Bob Miller and Nick Nixon for so many great years?
Yeah, the first thing I think about when I think about Nick is his unselfishness in an industry which involves a lot of ego, which I think is needed at times. He's one of the few that is able to get by without that. I think his daily routine is just to come to the rink and call the game and do it professionally. And he doesn't care about spotlight being shone on him. I think his decision-making, everything he does is about the team. And I really appreciate that.
So I mentioned at the beginning of every show, I've been a Kings fan for over 30 years. I really got seriously into hockey and the Kings during the 92-93 run to the Stanley Cup final. And you and Bob Miller were on the call. And I have literally never known Kings hockey without you involved in it. I looked up your age on the internet. It can't be true. But you still certainly have that youthful exuberance and enthusiasm when you call games. But you've seen Bob go. Now Nick is calling it a career. Have you thought about how much longer you'd like to keep doing this?
I have, no question. When you're starting to file for Social Security, it's time to maybe think about things. Yeah, I thought about it. It won't be that much longer. That's something that my wife, Susie, and I have been discussing for quite a long period of time now. So it's still fun. It's still great to be there. A recent game, the Kings against the Red Wings, and the goal that Adrian Kempe scored on a pass from Warren Foegele. I mean, that, to me, that brings me out of my seat. Something that is executed with such high skill, happens at high speed, the finish, the pass, the finish, everything. So that keeps me going. Certainly still enjoy it. Love to watch the Kings. Love to watch what's going around in the National Hockey League, and like to be involved with it, even though I'm not playing anymore. But certainly on the back nine.
Well, not trying to push you out the door by any stretch. I hope you certainly do it as long as you want to do it, which, and again, you're doing it at such a high level. We've been so spoiled as Kings fans with you and Bob and Nick. But let's talk about this year's Kings. We're getting ready to hit the 20-game mark. That'll be Wednesday against the Buffalo Sabres. Kings are 10-6-3 as we're recording this. They start off the year with that big road trip. They've been playing a pretty good portion of the season without Hall of Fame defenseman Drew Doughty, and unfortunately, he's still going to be out a little bit longer. But just what are your general thoughts on what we've seen so far from this year's LA Kings?
Well, general thoughts are, the first thing I was thinking about is how they're going to adapt to the new system. New neutral zone, actually a new forecheck, new penalty kill. The power play has been a struggle this year so far. Probably more changes personnel-wise than actual structure. But those were the things on my mind. And if that's what I had that's where my thoughts were going. I would say the Kings are fine. I've said it on the air with Nick numerous times, 3 or 4 times. So far, so good. Nothing special, but to be honest, I think the record is probably better than I thought it would be at this point because of the road games and the new system, all those things. Concerns are the power play. Concerns to me are the ups and downs during individual games where the neutral zone becomes an issue, which to me is completely expected and understandable, but it is still a concern because when you're learning a new system, I think it takes at least 25 games. And we're not there yet. So that consistency will come around. There's concerns with Quentin Byfield. There's concerns with certain guys getting it going on a more consistent basis offensively. But the positives. I think the goaltending has been, talk about expectations. Did the Kings think they had Vezina Trophy winners? No. But have they held their own? Yes, more so than that. I think when you look at how the Kings have done without Drew Doughty in the lineup because of the injury and how the defense has come together as a whole, if the biggest surprise is the offensive production by defensemen. The Kings' neutral zone system was designed to certainly slow the other team down, but also to counterattack quickly. And the Kings' defensemen have been involved in that. There's been some good traffic, so shots are going in for Kings defensemen. So, that's a long answer, but to try to summarize the first quarter of the season, I think so far, so good.
Jim Hiller is not a rookie coach necessarily. He's coached, been a head coach at other levels. He's been an assistant coach and, of course, had an interim job with the Kings last year before getting the full-time head coaching job. But it is different, right? You're now the full-time head coach. You've had a training camp to get ready for and to go through. How do you think he's handled everything so far in his first full season as a head coach?
Well, I'm going to say this. You're going to start out by coaches are evaluated based on the record. Having said that, I think he's done fine. He has the best home record in the National Hockey League since he took over, going back to last year. So certain things like that. The one thing I will say, my first point is from a media position. He is a breath of fresh air. He has new ideas. He doesn't have any problems discussing those ideas. He said it when he took the job. He loves to talk. He loves conversations, and that's what we get every day. There are times I just love the way he attacks it. There are times when he doesn't want to get into something. He just point blank says, I don't want to go any deeper into that. He just says that. But a lot of times he's extremely easy to work with. Now, again, you're evaluated on your record. So far, so good with his record. He did something the other night against Detroit, which was rather unique. So he had Alex Turcotte dressed after missing games due to injury, played him for almost 2 periods, and then decided to sit him down. Of course, during the game, we're watching that. And because it's so unique, we're thinking, there must be an injury. He must have tweaked something. But he was on the bench. If he has an injury, he's back in the room getting treatment. So we kind of figured out that. So we finally asked Jim after the game and more so the next day to talk to him about it. And he said, you know what? It was a plan all along. It was a plan to go 40 minutes with him and then go with 11 forwards in the last period. He said he didn't tell Alex that until it actually happened, which is completely understandable. If you tell a player something like that before the game, then your focus is not there. You're thinking ahead to when he's going to pull you as opposed to what you have to do. So all of that took place. And, when I talked to Jim, I asked him, I said, that's rather unique. Have you ever experienced that at any time before as a player or as a coach? And he said, no, not really. So I call him, he has an old school mentality, but to me, he's new age. He has that communication. When he talks to a player and goes over a situation, he doesn't dictate the conversation. He invites everyone into that conversation. And he'll go deep into it with a player. And that's where he is different. That's where he is unique. I think communication is probably the number one trait that any coach has to have now. I think Jim takes it to the next level. And I think it only helps the player individually. And, of course, it helps the team.
All right. Well, speaking of individual players, we're going to get into some of those individual LA players this year. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, no matter how your last game went, anytime you take the field, you got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed's the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, we're back with Kings longtime TV analyst Jim Fox. And Jim, of the new players that joined the team from outside the organization, Darcy Kemper, you kind of touched on it when you mentioned goaltending, Warren Foegele, Tanner Jeannot, Joel Edmondson. Do you feel like the Kings have gotten what they were looking for from that group when they brought him in?
Well, I think the first thing is a number. I think the Kings are tied for second in the for the most fights in the league. So there was a concern last year of, is this team tough enough? Are they in the trenches enough? All of those things. So Tanner Jeannot and Joel Edmondson, they have shored that up. Edmondson, more of a physical style back on the blue line, with Jeannot up front, making sure he's in on the forecheck. I think he's really improved that since about the first 7 or 8 games of the year. Talked to him, said he really started to understand the forecheck system and what was expected. So when he makes contact now, it's 100%, which brings up that physicality along with dropping the glove. So from that standpoint, overall, Foegele brings some size, but I think he brings speed. That's what he brings more than an edge or any of those types of things. So overall, I think the effect on the team has been exactly what the Kings had hoped for. I think Rob Blake talked about that. I think they analyzed the situation. And a lot of what I'm talking about is intangible. Yes, we can measure fights. You can measure hits. You can measure those things. But how it affects the entire group, I think the Kings have gotten what they wanted there. Darcy Kemper has been in and out with injury. But when he's played, I think he's played very well and won some games at times by himself. Goaltending for the Kings this year, Eddie, I think has been real strong early in games. When the Kings are, a lot of teams, you're just trying to find your way into a game. And they've been strong early, allowing the team to get feet underneath them and then go on and pick up wins.
Of the younger players who are on the team, and some of them getting a full-time chance to be NHLers, like Alex Turcotte and Brandt Clark, we've also seen some other guys maybe a little bit unexpected. Andre Lee, and most recently we have Hellenius has been called up. Thoughts on what you've seen from some of the younger guys so far this season?
Well, I think that Drew Doughty's injury has affected what you had to do in certain areas. Brandt Clark getting quality ice time, for the most part manning the quarterback on the first unit for the Kings on the power play. Points have dropped off a little bit of late, but the Kings are still getting wins when they need them. So I think he has proven that certainly from the offensive standpoint, he is an impact player. From the offensive standpoint, the other team has to worry about him. I think that Andre Lee, who has now been sent back down, received a really good compliment from Jim Hiller. Jim mentioned when they sent him down, there's a lot of times with young players, when you send a guy down, it's, okay, we need you to work on your own zone. We need you to work on your board work. We need you to work on, shutting the other team down. And yet they said, no, that's not the case. They want him down there to get offensive touches because they're very, very pleased with the reliability of Andre Lee. Sammy Hellenius comes up. And before the season, I chatted with Jim Hiller about Hellenius. He said both Hellenius and Lee were very reliable and responsible players, so they weren't worried that way. With Sammy right now, I think he's learning and he's doing it. He's just got to finish every single check. Eddie, this kid is huge.
Yes.
He is big. So it kind of, will your fourth line change the feel of your team? No. Will it change the identity of your team? Probably not. But, when you have a guy like Hellenius in the lineup, and if Lee's there too, you got some size now. It's a whole different look. So I think they've done what they've needed to do. Now it's all about, hoping the team gels and comes together, and those guys just get more comfortable with the roles, more confident in their roles, and do it that way. I think that's, Alex Laferriere, to me, is still in that young, since it's his second full season. If anyone out there has heard me talk about Laferriere before, they understand I have a very high respect for what he does, his sense for the game, and his sense for when trouble is going to happen and how he can cover up for trouble. Just a perfect fit with anyone. He just fits in whoever he plays with. I chatted with him early this year, and I said, "Where did you pick that up?" He said, advice from his dad was, when you have line mates, take a look at your line mates, take an element from their game and complement that element. And I think Alex does that as well as anyone. Just compliments, whether he's with Kopitar or whether he is with the line he's on now with Byfield and Fogle, whatever, he compliments anyone.
I mentioned on a recent show that we were planning on having you on today, and I didn't ask for any questions, but I did get one from Bruce in the OC, so I thought I'd ask you. He wanted to know what you thought about the differences were in this year's team compared to last year's team, and just kind of reading between the lines, and I know certainly it was discussed when Jim Hiller was hired, how this team will be different at the end of the season and hopefully get a different result in the postseason.
Yeah, again, it'll still take a while to get this system down. So that was the difference, right? It was 5 years of the same neutral zone. And that neutral zone dictated a lot of the breakouts and how the Kings would counterattack and transition. So that's the biggest difference. It comes in the structure, and it comes in the system, and it comes in how the Kings now, when they do break up a play, there was a goal in the last game by Mikey Anderson, a defenseman. Turnover in the neutral zone. In past systems, the Kings would be skating 5 men backwards in the zone. And when there's a turnover, well, you're not necessarily in position to counterattack or transition quickly, and you don't have numbers. Well, now the Kings have numbers on attack, and that created a clear-cut 2-on-1 right away, and all of a sudden you pucks in the back of the net. So those were the differences. I was clued in by the coaching staff earlier before the season started about the penalty kill and what they're trying to do. That's a complete difference. The Kings a year ago allowed 2-on-1s down low, expected the defenseman to take care of that, or even the goaltender, make sure the pass doesn't connect. A lot of responsibility there. This year, it's the strong side defenseman is just laying down flat on his stomach and trying to take away passing lane. The aggression all over the defensive zone is much more increased. So I'm going to go to the system. The system changes were there, and the system changes have been made, and it is different. And so far, so good.
We talk about the new guys coming in from outside the organization, the young guys coming in, and that gets all the attention and all the excitement. But I want to talk about a guy who's in his 19th season, all with the Kings. And I try not to take him for granted, and I try to remind myself, enjoy watching one of the greatest, if not maybe the greatest LA King of all time. Anze Kopitar has a hat trick on opening night and just continues to be a rock for the LA Kings.
I'm not afraid to say he's the greatest Kings player ever.
Yeah.
Now, again, people say Gretzky, as an LA King, lifelong King, I say Wayne Gretzky is an Edmonton Oiler. He won 4 Stanley Cups with the Oilers, certainly had a huge effect on the Kings in the National Hockey League. But Anze, to me, is the best player to ever play for the Kings. It comes with the way he approaches the game, his mental aspect of understanding defense is as important as offense. But then the numbers he continues to put up, the control of a puck he has when he has it. And then, I keep going back. I know there was Dean Lombardi when he was here as a general manager, he had a saying. He said there's 5 type of players. There's the journeyman player. There's the average player. There's the star. There's the superstar. And then there's the winner. And Anze Kopitar is the winner. And his consistency and longevity, Nick and I and Daryl, we go over it on the broadcast just about every single night. By the time he's done, you're talking top 30 ever. I mean, he's going to be around that number. And to do that and those are offensive numbers, to do that with his approach and how he just shuts down other teams and his responsibilities that he's given to be the number 1 shutdown guy and take faceoffs, just an incredible force and an incredible player.
We're going to talk a little bit more about what's coming up for the LA Kings, hopefully, as we go along here with Jim Fox. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Just go to PrizePicks app and make your picks right now, and you could be a winner. And you could now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states. It includes California. Download the PrizePick app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $5 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, we are wrapping it up with LA Kings analyst Jim Fox. And Jim, coming into the season, we talked about it a little bit. Kings, we're talking about maybe being a little bit more blue collar. We know they've switched from the 1-3-1 to the 1-2-2. The penalty kill, as you talked about, much more aggressive. How do you feel about the changes being implemented? And I think you talked about maybe it was at 25 games or something like that. How do you think it looks so far, and how do you think it can be better going forward? Is there still room for improvement, right, for the Kings to get better as it goes along and they get more used to these things they're doing?
Everyone talks about consistency, but what I've seen with the neutral zone during individual games. So, for instance, when we talk about consistency, many times it's from game to game, or putting together 3 or 4 games in a row, or going bad for 3. All of those. The Kings have had some great periods in the neutral zone, and then in the same game, they've had some awful periods in the neutral zone, and that's where I think the improvement can come. Again, I don't think that's unexpected. I think it's completely normal with a system change. I think 25 games is the minimum in which it takes everyone to get on the same page, and you're still going to have the ups and downs, but that's where it can happen. I think that's where things can get together a little bit better from that standpoint. But again, I'm going back to the record, where they are, the home games coming up, all those types of things, hanging in there in the Pacific Division. I think the Kings would be, you're never happy and you're never satisfied, but I think you have to be respect the solid position the Kings are in right now.
You mentioned him earlier, Quinton Byfield. He's always such a big topic amongst fans and the expectations, drafted where he has been, and you see the physical ability, the size, and some of the spectacular things he's done. He started at center, briefly moved back to wing. Now he's back at center. As far as the goal scoring, just 2 on the season. What have you seen from Quinton Byfield, and what are the expectations that he can start to get that production going as the season goes along?
Well, I'll start with the concern then. The biggest concern to me, and this is not, it's difficult to explain, but I think I have a baseball analogy that I use. If you go up to bat and you're looking to hit the home run, you very rarely make contact. I think when you go up looking to get a single, well, you usually make contact, and sometimes you hit home run because of that mindset. I would assume, because of some of the style of goals that Quinton has scored, you're talking about highlight type goals, exhibiting the skill you just talked about, his size, his foot speed, his hands, his ability to protect the puck, to make a deke, quick hands, all those things. I think to a certain extent, he's looking for that too much. He's looking for the home run. And I think there are times it's so easy, and I find it in myself because as a player, I know, okay, it's so easy to second guess, but what I'd like to see on a more consistent basis is this. When he chases down a loose puck and he has entry into the offensive zone, just take it wide with speed sometime. Don't stop and button hook and wait for the guy coming. There are times for that, but I think if you can get down to 80-20, 80% of the time, just use that size and take it to the net. And you'll either draw a penalty or you'll get a chance. Now, it might not be the most spectacular goal, but it'll get the puck to an area where everyone can score, including yourself. That's my concern. So can he come out of that? The thing I'm not concerned with is his work ethic. I watch him every single day in practice. He is working on so many different elements of his game continuously. The effort is there at that point. When you get to the game, the energy, he's there, he's on pucks. I think he's just a little bit in between right now on what he believes he needs to do to be effective and help the team. And I think I just documented it. it is a concern. There's no question. I think, I was doing podcasts before the season started and said, because it was preseason, saying, you know what, let's, maybe by the end of the year, maybe it's Quentin Byfield as the number one center and Andre Kopitar as the number two center. Now, the way the season has developed so far, it hasn't even come close to that. Let's be honest. It hasn't even come close to that. So he is still young enough to understand he has to learn some things, but he has enough experience now where some of those things are going to have to come together for him. Having said that, the team's record is still good. And if you can work on those things and still have the record the team does, I think the Kings and Quentin are in a pretty good spot.
Final question for you. I know you've mentioned this specifically on this show, and I'm sure in others. American Thanksgiving is usually the point, right? Where if you're in a playoff spot at that position of the calendar, pretty good indicator you're going to make the playoffs. The Kings have been near the top and a few times at the top of the standing so far this season. Thanksgiving is fast approaching. If the Kings are in fact in a playoff position, do you think Kings fans can feel relatively comfortable that it's going to be a fourth straight year of postseason hockey for the Kings?
Well, Eddie, I'll say this. I'm probably not one of the guys that would talk that way. I understand. I've seen the numbers. I know the percentages. I know exactly what you're talking about, American Thanksgiving. My mindset, which is probably not good, Jesse Owens, don't look behind because someone might be catching you. Well, unfortunately, I have that type of mentality. I wish I didn't. I wish I was more forward thinking. But I look at it. Man, everyone hates that. I look at it game to game. I don't look at any further than the next game. And if you can, the Kings just played Detroit, had a 4-1 win, pretty solid, real good in the offensive zone. That was the impressive thing to me was Jim Hiller and the coaching staff talked about two areas, breakout passes and offensive zone possession time. And in that game, they excelled. I mean, they were in the offensive zone all night long, and that starts with getting out of your own zone. So they took something from practice, they took something they talked about, and they implemented it into a game. But as far as certain milestones, certain dates, unfortunately, and my hair is starting to get a little bit gray now, it's because I worry about the next game. I don't look that far ahead, and it's one of those things where perhaps I've heard and listened to too many coaches over the years, but process is what I concern myself with, not the wins and losses. The wins and losses take care of themselves. I'm concerned with how the team is playing, and that will make a big difference on how many wins or losses they get.
Yeah, I was going to say, being a former player, you get that drilled in your head. It's about the next game, good or bad, move on. So I can certainly understand that mindset. He is the great Jim Fox. You can see him and hear him alongside Nick Nixon and Daryl Evans and the rest of the crew on the FanDuel Sports Network, and the 710 ESPN app is where you can hear him all season long, and that includes Wednesday's home game against the Buffalo Sabres. Face-off time set for 7:30 p.m. LA time. Jim, it is always an absolute pleasure. Keep up the great work, and thank you, as always, for taking some time with us today.
All right, Eddie, my pleasure anytime. I appreciate you having me on. It's great to talk to you, and yeah, let's look forward to that next game, Buffalo. That's all we're looking at.
All right, let's see another win like we saw against Detroit. All right, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, that was Jim Fox. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and always love getting a chance to talk with him, and always love how much he's available to this show and everybody else. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Wednesday's show, we're going to preview the Kings-Sabres game. Also on Thursday, of course, recap that game, and then Friday we have another weekly Kings fan feedback show. I'll also, of course, update you on any of the latest news and notes involving the LA Kings as the week goes along. If you want to get in on that show, the email address for the feedback show, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments on YouTube as well. Love for you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.